Forge FC is ready for their upcoming match.
Simply stunning stuff. And finally, their goal. My word, what a rocket.
Now, let's get you up to date with Anthony Urciuoli and Match Day Preview on the Forge Audio Network.
Hey, Forge fans, it is the Forge Audio Network. I'm Anthony Urciuoli. This is the Match Day Preview, but it might feel a little different because this is we're not just previewing any match. This is a CPL final Match Day Preview. I feel like it's been a while since we've had a chat, and that's because Forge had a bye week that was earned after a monumental win at Calvary a couple weeks ago. We're going to go through it all. We're going to be joined by Adam Jenkins shortly. He is the voice of the CPL on One Soccer. We're also going to be joined by Forge FC attacker David Choiniere. So a jam-packed show, which is fitting because it is Saturday, 6 o'clock, the final match of the CPL season. Forge hosting Cavalry at Tim Hortons Field in Hamilton. And it's fitting because we're talking about the two best clubs this season, really the two best clubs in CPL history. Let's just call it what it is. The two best clubs to ever played in this league will go head-to-head on Saturday. How did we get here? Well, for Forge, as mentioned, and as you already know, but it bears repeating because, it's a final. We're going to have a lot of fans that maybe they've never seen a Forge match. Maybe they haven't been following all season. Maybe they just heard there's a final and they want to be a part of it. That's okay too. And for those people and for everyone, we're going to go back 2 weeks. Forge FC, Cavalry FC going head-to-head in a semifinal in Calgary. And at that point, Cavalry, they hadn't lost a home game since mid-June. So they ran away with the regular season title, almost unbeatable at home. Forge FC probably wanted a better result this season. They finished second, still very good. Still probably thought they could have gotten more out of this regular season. But at the end of the day, they show up in Forge fashion, big moments, big games. This club shows up, and they did. And they secured a home CPL final. It also, it earned Forge a bye week, and that's a big one. And we're going to talk about that shortly. But it forced Cavalry into a corner where all of a sudden they had to now beat Pacific at home in order to qualify for the final. And they did with relative ease, if we're being honest. The 2-1 final in favor of Cavalry over Pacific is probably pretty flattering for Pacific, all things considered. And it never really seemed in doubt. You probably suspected it. We were going to have a Forge Cavalry final. It was just going to happen. Now, on one side, again, you have Forge. They've played in every single CPL final since this league's inception 5 years ago. They've won 3 out of the 4 finals they've been a part of. The only loss coming at home. And really, that's the only thing this club has yet to accomplish. Just a laundry list of accolades, accomplishments, championships, hardware. They have not been able to hoist the North Star Cup at Tim Hortons Field at the conclusion of a final. They have not done that yet, but they will have the opportunity on Saturday. Other side of the pitch, you have their rivals. Cavalry, their quest for their first ever title. Now, remember, Forge won the first ever CPL final between these two sides on aggregate back during an old format. And then they beat Cavalry again on aggregate last season in a semifinal. So this is a one game. There's no aggregate. There's no whatever happens in those 90 minutes. If it's tied, it will go to penalty kicks. I got to tell you, for those of you who have maybe severe anxiety issues, maybe you have a heart condition, high blood pressure, you're not going to want to hear what I'm about to say. I have a sneaking suspicion, a gut feeling. Remember, we have never had a CPL final end on penalties before. I just have a feeling that this one may require more than 90 minutes. Not for the faint of heart, especially if you're a Forge fan. You've witnessed enough heartbreak in PKs. I have a suspicion that we're. I hope not. I don't know that I can handle it, to be honest with you. But it's a gut feeling, I guess. And you know what a great storyline is? I mean, there's no shortage of storylines, but Forge, they have struggled at home this season. One of the best road teams in the league, probably the best, but a middle of the pack home team. And frankly, the lack of points at home ultimately is why Forge finished in second place. Now, ultimately, it doesn't matter at all, because Forge has a home game when it means the most. I mean, they've accomplished everything they need. And remember, I told you this at the conclusion of the Forge Cavalry match. We were talking about CONCACAF, and I told you, you had to do it. You had to grit your teeth, plug your nose, hold your breath, and cheer for Cavalry in their semifinal match against Pacific. Now, without question, Pacific would have been a more favorable matchup for Forge, but with Cavalry winning the regular season title, their spot in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, it was already secured. And if Cavalry, now this scenario has been set up, or if Cavalry does win on Saturday, Forge will still get a spot in the CONCACAF Champions Cup because they finished in second in the regular season and because Cavalry already secured one spot. So the next one would go to Forge. So you had to cheer for them. I know you didn't want to do it, but with that, hey, Forge has now qualified for the 2024 CONCACAF Champions Cup. And I don't want to get anyone's hopes up. So, this will be Forge's fourth appearance in CONCACAF play. They competed in the CONCACAF League in 2019, 2020, and 2021, and the CONCACAF Champions League in 2022. Forge will take on some of the largest clubs in the world right at Tim Hortons Field next year. It's great for the city, for the sport, for the team, for the league. There are no downsides here. And with the new CONCACAF competition structure, you get 27 of the best clubs from across Canada, US, Mexico, Central America, Caribbean, just battling their way through a 5-round knockout stage in pursuit of a championship. This is why I said don't get your hopes up, but there's a possibility of something huge happening. Because guess who will also be playing in the Champions Cup next year? He wears number 10. He's from Argentina. Currently plays in Miami. And oh yeah, he's arguably the best soccer player the world has ever seen. Lionel Messi could be making a stop in Hamilton next year, depending on how the draw plays out. I mean, just consider that for a second and how mind-blowing that would be. Not to get too far ahead or to get anyone's hopes up, but that remains a possibility. So it's kind of exciting. All right. We have a lot to get to here, and you've heard me talk long enough. Let's bring in Forge FC attacker. I call him Big Game Dave. Now, I actually don't know how he feels about Big Game Dave. I just know when I say it, he gets kind of he's a humble guy. He doesn't want to. He's not a braggart, right? So I'll say it. But he is Big Game Dave, David Choiniere, and he joins us on the Match Day Preview. All right, David Choiniere. First off, we need a health update. We want to make sure you're doing all right. I know it's obviously been a challenging season for you in that regard, but how are things health-wise?
Great. I feel amazing. I mean, I can say finally, after a long period of time, I'm finally back to training and healthy and feeling fit again and healthy again and just excited to play.
Yeah, and how tough is it? Because it's not just the physical part of it. I mean, just mentally not being able to participate and be with your teammates. A lot of times, that's even more difficult than the actual
Hmm.
physical part of the injury.
Oh yeah, being injured is one of the toughest part of it. As an athlete. You your day-to-day change completely, your routine change. You miss you miss a lot of training. You're a bit disconnected with the team.
Mm.
You're a bit separate. You do your own rehab on your own with the physio. You're not with the players. It's you're on a different schedule, and it gets really challenging mentally. And that's the toughest part to stay focused on your rehab and not lose sight of getting back to the field as fast as you can.
Is there any benefit? I mean, when you're watching from a suite or from a press box, do you get at least gain a different perspective? I mean, is there a way to learn from that experience and just having a different view, just even from a tactical level? Can you make the best of that situation?
Of course, you can always learn from the stand. You see a different view, different side of the game, and you just watch and try to learn what you can do better and what would I have done in that situation. But also the perspective mentally change. You it's like something is taken away from you. You're not able to perform and play, and you get really hungry. You want to play again, and you
Mm.
when you get back to the field, you have way more motivation, and you're just excited, and your perspective change. It's like right now I feel just grateful to be back on the pitch and play with my teammates again.
How important was it to get those minutes in your last match against Calvary, just to touch the field and just to get a taste of the action, especially with that bye in between and now back at it this weekend? But how important was it just to get on the field a couple of weeks ago?
Super important just to get those feelings back, the feelings
Yeah.
of competing, performing, and just being involved with the team, and especially in a tough scenario where I came in 85th and had to secure the win. It was 2-1 at the time, and there was 5 minutes left plus added time. And I remember Bobby just told me, "You run up and down for 10 minutes. You do the best as you can," and that's what I did. And just getting back with the team and being part of a victory is just super important.
And I know you're focused on a championship right now, but the club did secure a CONCACAF
Hmm.
spot next season. You've played in a lot of those matches. What does it mean to a team, to a player, to play in these continental tournaments? From a standpoint of exposure, experience, and just overall growth.
Oh, it's the biggest competition in the North Central America. So being involved in that competition and playing against, we can say, the best team in the continent is just massive for us. And as a player, you want to you want to test yourself against those teams. And we're probably going to play against big player with big names and big reputation, and to go face to face with them and just challenge yourself. It's what you want as a player.
Forge, Cavalry, the players, the coaches, everyone's so familiar with each other by now. Both sides will obviously have a game plan in place for Saturday. But how much of these matches are decided kind of outside of the tactics, just coming down to managing emotions of a big game and kind of the mental aspect of the game? How important is that in a match this big?
It's managing your emotion, managing the preparation leading to the game, because it's a lot of emotion throughout the day, and when you get there, it's a lot of excitement. You see the fans, you see your opponent, and there's a lot of emotion you go through, and managing them is super important. And then the biggest challenge I always say is to be good on that day. Like, it doesn't matter what you've been doing all season, what you've been doing all 4 years. It's really to be good on that moment, on that day.
Now, I almost only call you Big Game Dave. You've built up the reputation, and I don't. Is there? Can you even explain what it's like in those moments? Do you not feel it the same way? Are you able to just kind of quiet the noise? What goes through your mind in these matches? And How are you able to perform so well despite those pressures?
I think it's managing the emotion, managing my excitement for the game, and when it's time to go on, you just let it go. You let it happen. You don't think too much. You don't overthink. Um, I always say, you let things happen. Like you don't overthink it, and you just try to do your best. And at the end, if you give your best, doesn't matter what's at the end.
Yeah, and the preparation probably plays a big. I mean, if you're prepared, then I guess to your point, there's nothing to be overly concerned about.
Of course, preparation is everything. If you check every box before the game, then you're confident in your preparation and you're confident leading to the game. And after you just let your preparation and your talent do the work. So there's not much there's not much after that, and you just focus on that, and the rest it's all your control, and you just do your thing and you have fun. It's the most exciting game of the year for me. With
Mm-hmm.
expected a big crowd. Hopefully, we can beat the record from Ottawa, and you just grab all the energy from the stadium and you transfer it to your performance.
Okay, and you kind of answered. That was going to be my last question,
Hmm.
but just to be able to hoist. Well, it's not a shield anymore. I guess it's a cup now, but to be able to hoist it in front of. It's the only thing the club hasn't checked off of its list of objectives is win a title at home. So I'm sure that's something that you're hoping to deliver to the fans this weekend.
1000%. It's something we want to do in front of our own fans, in front of our family or friends. It's gonna be a special moment. To lift it away, it's different, but lifting in your stadium in front of your fans, they're there to support us. They've been there all year long, and that's just uh, that's just gonna be a special moment, and we're excited for that.
Awesome, David. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Big match this weekend. Best of
Yes,
luck, and
thank you.
hopefully we're watching you guys celebrate at the end.
Hopefully,
Awesome.
hopefully that's the goal.
All right. I didn't even really ask David about Calvary because I think I don't know what's left to learn. These two clubs, they've played each other so many times. The coaches know each other so well. The players. I didn't really get too deep into Calvary because we're going to do that with Adam Jenkins, but I think I'm more interested in the mindset and the club. You think about it. I mean, this goes for everything. The world's kind of separated by two groups, just in a very basic sense. You have kind of the people who can rise up through adversity, and it kind of brings the best. They're able to up their game when things get more and more difficult. And then there's another side that they kind of shrink in big moments. It's just the way of the world. And certainly it is a very big part of the sports world. And really, it's what separates championship teams from the other. Now, I mean, here's the reality. I don't think either team is going to shrink in the big game, to be honest with you. And that's why my earlier prediction of this maybe needing more than 90 minutes, I mean, that's where that comes from. I don't think either team is shrinking here. And that's why I think we're in for a really good. I mean, that when two teams can rise to that occasion, and I do think both teams are capable of that. We can talk about Cavalry's playoff track record all we want, but it's still a very good team, a lot of experience, an experienced coaching staff particularly, and that matters in these moments. And you just end up with these head-on collisions where it could go either way. Now, before we get to Adam Jenkins, I do want to mention, speaking of number 10, we talked about one number 10 much earlier, but another number 10, the most important number 10, your captain, Kyle Becker, along with teammate Terran Campbell, have been named finalists for the Player of the Year award. The lone award in the league voted on by the players. Campbell, the most prolific goal scorer in CPL history. And I mean, Kyle Becker, just the most consistently complete player the CPL has ever seen. Normally in these match day previews, I kind of go through this list of stats, head to head and whatever. I'm not going to, because honestly, who cares? Who cares what the stats are at this point? To be honest with you, we're at a point now where the stats are meaningless. When you get to a final, matches of this magnitude don't follow a statistical script. They just don't. and they're just largely determined by the managing of emotions. Who's better at adapting to that particular environment, and just finding ways to thrive in the emotional chaos. That's the angle I like. And helping us sift through some of that chaos is the calming voice, the voice of the Canadian Premier League on One Soccer, Adam Jenkins. He's witnessed just I want to say pretty much every single match this league has ever played, at least the majority of them. Adam Jenkins has been there calling these matches, and if he doesn't have insight, I don't know who does. So let's bring Adam on to the CPL final edition of the Match Day Preview. All right, first off, Adam, welcome back. Another appearance of the Match Day Preview. I usually go to you maybe a few times a year, but this year I wanted to save you. I wanted to save you for the big one. So here we are, another CPL final between Calvary and Forge.
I was getting a little bit worried that I had said something to you that you didn't like, because I kept checking my phone and I was like, there's been nothing from Urciuoli. And what have I done? Have I alienated the entire Hamilton fan base by saying that they were the third best team in the regular season or something early in the year, which will be fair. And I am fully prepared to take my lumps this week, especially at the panel event on Match Day -1. That'll be fun.
You know, I've been talking a lot about, because I didn't bother going through. Normally for these Match Day previews, I go into the stats and stuff, but I don't think they matter at this point. I think we're past stats, we're past numbers, and I've been talking a lot about kind of the emotion and the mental grind of just being a pro athlete in general. Something I'll never have to experience. I did one of those 23andMe things, and in my results it said genetically, my genetics don't resemble a superior athlete or something like that.
Good.
And I thought, first off, obviously I know, I figured that out.
Harsh.
Yeah. In writing, it made it a little more hurtful, even though I really knew, but, no, but these matches, the stats kind of go out the window. And do you find you've called so many big matches that it usually just does come down to the club that can rise to the occasion?
Yeah, especially with these clubs in particular. We're still waiting for the history of, we as the neutral, I'm sure Forge fans are not waiting for this to happen, but we're still waiting for Cavalry to get one up on Forge in these big matches when it really matters the most. And I think on the balance of this season, I'm really glad with, and like this, I've taken some hits for this. I don't care, quite frankly. I adored the playoff format when it came out. It's very much sounds like, oh, he's trumpeting for the league. No, I think it's fantastic. I can't think of one thing that I would change with it. And it's played out almost exactly as the league would have hoped it would in terms of entertainment value, right? Cavalry rewarded for dominating the regular season. Because Forge get the better of them in that semifinal, they get the chance to rescue themselves, to have a chance at the double, as they should with how good they were in the regular season. But Forge plays their cards right. They go on the road and win, and then they get to host the final. Pacific almost runs the gauntlet, and they almost sneak into the final. It's all played out the way that I think the design of it was, regardless of who goes through, but storylines and narratives perfect. But then, we're back again, aren't we? Cavalry and Forge, there's going to be history either way. Either we get a new champion or Forge becomes the first team to lift a trophy at home. And we can talk about this if you want. I can't say too much, but the North Star Cup looks so good.
Do you know how much that threw me off today when I was looking? I keep saying North Star Shield. And then I was on Instagram and I saw the CPL post a photo of the cup with poutine in it. And I was like, oh, it's a cup. It's not a shield. Cup. It is a cup. Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah, I think I've not seen it in person. I've seen the photos and I've seen the renders. I think and I was sworn to secrecy FBI style when the commissioner opened his laptop and was like, take a look at this. So he's obviously proud of it. The team should be proud of it. They did a great job with it. But yes, can confirm it as a cup, can confirm whomever wins will be drinking multiple beverages of their choice from it, as they should.
A lot of water, probably a lot of milk.
So just lots of water. Gatorade, BioSteel, yes. Pick your favorite. Yeah, I'm not sure who the league's. I think Gatorade is the Canada soccer sponsor. Gatorade, not BioSteel. Gatorade, that's the one.
I mean, and the thing with Calvary, I mean, they have to continually answer these questions and get asked about Forge. I mean, for that, to get that monkey off their back, certainly there's pressure on both clubs, but for Calvary to lose another final and to lose to Forge, you just feel like that would just hurt a little more than the vice versa.
Certainly. Well, I think it's going to sting either, but just sting for different reasons. I'll never forget after the semifinal leg when Cavalry was ousted by Forge again last year. It's like, what do you say? Like, I have gotten a pretty good relationship, especially with some of the day one guys. I think I ran into Marco Carducci 7 times at the final last year. And there was always like this, he and his lovely partner just happy to be there. They were great ambassadors for the league despite not contesting the final. But it's like, what do you say? Like, see you again in a year? Like, and it's kind of like the Leafs analogy that'll resonate in Hamilton more than it will in Calgary, but it's like, doesn't matter if they don't win. Doesn't matter if they don't win. They can be great in the regular season. And I think the fact that they did get a trophy, they were the first to get into CONCACAF, will help if they lose. But no doubt, if it's Forge again, that's going to be a long flight back to Calgary.
Yeah, what do you think? Speaking of changes to formats, the new CONCACAF, I guess it's now the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
Yes,
which
lots of cups, Anthony.
All the cups. So, but I think, for Cavalry Forge, from a CPL standpoint, if you're picking 2 clubs to represent the league, I mean, these are the 2 you probably want.
Yeah, the only thing that makes that conversation a bit interesting is what happened. Like what will the teams do in the off season? Because we saw Forge this year do nothing because they didn't really need to. You could make the argument that maybe it cost them a bit of complacency, but look where they are again, hosting the final. Who gets sold? Who moves on? And that's the year-on-year CPL question. The other thing, and I don't want to be Debbie Downer because it's a big deal for the league. If it starts in February again, that's not good for the CPL. Cavalry may not be able to play at home. Like, that's the other thing we will eventually get into. It's not a priority right now, but the depending on the ownership, what Spruce Meadows wants to do with the grass, they may not be able to play at Atco Field if the schedule is unveiled to be in February. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that come calling, inquiring, and I think there's 5 or 6 teams that will have some big names shopped around. But on the balance, you're right. The prestige, the success, great ambassadors, and it just feels kind of like finally for the Cavs. Pacific were very well deserved. That match against Waterhouse will be one that lives in infamy for a long time, and then they bowed out in I think very valiant fashion. But for Cavalry, it's like, okay, they put in half a decade of work. They feel like they're finally going to get their chance to do it, and then that's going to be something else for us to obsess over in the off season. Schedule, draws, all of that. It's going to be great.
So we will look forward then to Lionel Messi playing at Tim Hortons Field.
That's exactly what I said. Yes,
that's
I'm
all
glad
I heard.
you were able to
know.
infer.
Yeah, I can read.
You're a great listener.
I can read between the lines. I also, with these 2 clubs, I mean, what do you, even if you are, preparing, even just from a tactical, I mean, these clubs know each other so well. Sure. How many more surprises can you possibly pull out to try and one up the other guy?
None.
Yeah.
None is the answer. I think there's going to be both Bobby Smirniotis and Tommy Uldin Jr. are too good at the tactical game to just roll out the same teams again. But so they'll find some nuances, like matchups they might like, different tempos, different philosophies when they press, when they sit back. But I mean, at this point, it's 90 minutes or 120 in penalties to determine who's better on the day. And I love the stat. I think it was Mitchell Tierney who dug it up, but it's one of the great guys at camphail.ca. Of the 25 now matches that these clubs have played, I think it's 23 of them have been draws or a 1-goal win. So it's always close. The margins are that fine. And because it's the 26th time they've met, because they're meeting again after 2 weeks and then 4 in the regular season, like, there's not a ton that they can do differently. It's just about winning your battles on the day and trying to entertain and absorb and handle the different levels of pressure. For Cavalry, don't want to lose to Forge again. For Forge, don't want to lose at home again in the CPL final.
Do you know, I mean, what has it been? What has Cavalry done this year? That regular season, there was so much parity this year, but Cavalry really distanced itself.
Yeah.
Is there anything in particular you can just kind of pinpoint on just what worked so well for them this year?
I think their best players were their best players every game. And then
Mm-hmm.
when one of the, like, they never had more than one player take it the day off. And
Right.
like, and from that, I mean, it's, if their best guys, your Moosies, your Bevins, your Klomps, go down the list. If their best is a consistent 9, they were never lower than a 7 or an 8. Like, nobody ever had a howler of a game, and they were just within that competitive locker room able to keep themselves on their toes always. And there were some really good young players that made a push. Gareth Smith Doyle is absolutely beloved in that dressing room. He wasn't featuring as much because of the way Bevan was playing. Same with Joe Mason. Like, don't forget, that's Joe Mason and his resume, and he's playing like 10, 15 minutes a game. Like, that's how much they've developed within that team. I think their back line doesn't get enough credit. I think Dan Klomp's going to get the headlines. We'll see on Thursday if he gets a DPOY or if he is player of the year. I personally think he's worthy of one of them. We can talk about ballots another time, who I voted for, but they just didn't have a weakness. Marco Carducci, you know what you're getting from him. Match in, match out. The midfield was great. Camargo stayed healthy. They stayed healthy for the most part, other than the two big ones were Alarcon and Montgomery, who missed a fair bit of time. But it was almost like when we talked about after losing to Forge last year, like, what do you say? I think it was, as much as the other years, oh, woe is us, this sucks, we'll get them next time. The mindset was just, we're not going to lose again. And they, as soon as the format was released, as soon as they knew that there were 2 CONCACAF berths, they're like, bare minimum is we're getting one of these. And then the trophy announcement and everything else. I don't recall with them ever being like, oh, it was a bad game. Maybe the 0-0 at Tim Hortons Field, like, that was a horrible game to watch from just a purely entertainment standpoint. That was one for the purists, but they didn't have an off day. And I think what was interesting with them and with Halifax was there were 2 ways that could have gone. That first 2 rounds of the season, or round and a half, where it was like draw, loss, draw. It's like, when are they going to do it? But on the balance of the year, you look at it when the dust was settled, you go, well, if they lose, if 2 of those draws are losses, like, it changes the complexion. Sure. And I think for me with Cavalry, the big moment was when they went on that long road trip, the Ontario swing. And I think people were kind of having the conversations, or we even around the office, or CPL newsroom supporters, pick your group, was, if they can get 4 points out of this, they're probably going to be in comfortably to win the CPL Shield. But then I think they got like 7 of the 9, and it was like, okay, it's done. Like, it's dusted. This is going to be them cruising the end of the year. But even within those games, not taking the foot off the gas. Like, they throttled Pacific in the regular season finale. There was nothing really to play for. Pacific had everything to play for, and Calvary's like, nah, we'll just go win again.
Yeah, and then Forge has this kind of, it's weird thinking about it, because even just from the fan reaction, it seemed like this disappointing season. But I mean, they finished second, but it just shows you where the kind of the bar is and where the standards are. But then they go into that match against Calvary, and they flip a switch. It just seems like, even when things don't look like they're going well, in the back of your mind, you're like, okay, but at any point they could just kind of turn this around. What is it? Where does that switch? You've seen this club play so many times now. What is it about those moments where they just seem to be able to kick it into a different gear? Yeah,
I think you don't have to look much further than Kyle Becker, because he loves a villain arc in the playoffs. He loves scoring at Echo Field. For me, it was as simple as that. They won the day. They got that important first goal. They got a little bit of luck. And I think for people outside of Hamilton or outside of Forge supporters, it's an infuriating sense again to see Forge there, because I have all the time in the world for people who want to make the argument that Forge shouldn't have finished second. I think it's absolutely asinine that a head-to-head record is not a tiebreaker. But the other side of that argument is, Halifax knew that when the season started. Forge knew that when the season started. So there's no screams of hysteria that it's unfair or unjust. It's just, they did get lucky in a lot of different ways this season. And part of me has always wondered, as we've previously discussed, neither of us are athletes. This is why we have microphones instead of boots on. There is nothing for me to relate to about complacency and going through the ringer and playing the same 7 teams 4 times a year and traveling across the country and dealing with all of these different factors. I think it was stale at time for Forge. They're like, are we really going to get up for a Tuesday match against Pacific for the third time this year? And that was the fine margin for me between Cavalry season and Forge's season, as at time there was complacency. Thank goodness for Benny Badibanga because of the injuries to Borges and Choiniere. That makes a big difference. He was that spark that they needed. Pasillas getting going at the right time at the end of the year. But I mean, again, he and Campbell and Hamilton were really, really quiet again this season at times. So there's all of these layers and parts of the season where you can point to be like, that's the reason, or that's the reason. But I think it was just the body of work that it wasn't as dominant as they've been. And also don't forget to give credit, and not suggesting that anyone is, Forge and Cavalry's head start is gone. That 3 or 4 years where Sigma and Foothills and the fact that they have the two best coaches for me in the league right now, like that mattered for a long time. It matters less now because everyone else is gelling and figuring it out. Pacific, if they didn't fall off a cliff, they could and theoretically should have been the side that lifted the CPL shield with how dominant they were for the first half of the season. Like the parity is so much better. Vancouver turned it on. They were at times really difficult to watch, if we're being fair, but that's not a surprise for a young team of teenagers and first time teammates together. I think Ashwin Gapi deserves a ton of credit for the way they ended that season, but they weren't a team that you were really worried about other than Forge and Langley earlier in the season and self-inflicted wounds, but that's in the past now. They turned it up, and Valor is always pesky at the end of the year. Like that's the difference, right? Is there's no easy games. So right. I think the league's catching up to Forge. I think I'm very interested to see what Bobby does with this roster in the offseason of players a la Daniel Kritzen who might want a new challenge, players who get sold on, what happens. But those are conversations for next week that they would like to have with the North Star Cup sat at the coffee table in front of them.
Not a shield. It's a cup.
Not a shield.
We have to stress that.
Yes.
I don't.
And this one you still don't put in the microwave because it's made of sterling silver.
That's good to know. Yeah. Noted. I'm not going to ask you for a prediction because you are an impartial voice in the Canadian Premier League. But
all of my predictions have been wrong in the playoffs, to be fair, in that I've said this is the game that's going to extra time and penalties. This is the one that's going to do it. I can't believe we haven't had one. It shocks me that we haven't had a single one.
That's where I was going to go with this. I have a feeling. I have a feeling that we are going to get a CPL final to end on penalties this year. It's a gut feel. Something about the way these two teams play each other at Tim Hortons Field. Mm-hmm. It's very tight. If there's a winner, it's usually late. I don't know. And that also stresses you talk about depth and your bench. Subs are going to play a huge role in this one.
Sure, they will.
Imagine. Yeah,
absolutely, they will. Look, I know you've got the proud Italian in you, so penalties and finals are probably still a little bit. No, okay, sorry about that.
I think my grandfather's slipper is still lodged into the TV screen from the Baggio miss in the 90s.
Immortalized, just get there. Like this could be and should be the game. I think and again, I've been wrong, so take none of this for granted, or take all of this for granted. I think we're going to at least extra time. I don't know that it's going to see penalties. Maybe that's the person in me that hates penalties from a competition standpoint. Mm-hmm. But then again, this is a cup tournament, so maybe it's a little bit more fitting than if it was just single table type of thing. But yeah, I think we're going the distance in this one for sure. Although I still, based on this postseason, based on these two teams, heavily favor the team who scores first.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I'm going to let you rest up your voice because you have a big weekend ahead of you.
Yes.
And as always, it's a pleasure having you on.
I'll see you next year based on your track record, Anthony. This time next year, I'll get a text or an email to join the show.
It's like a gift when it's something special. We don't want to wear you out.
It's appreciated. It's appreciated. I'll tell my bosses that maybe they can take that strategy a little bit, but that's neither here nor there.
If you're advocating for just a little you time, I can help you out.
No.
I will send an anonymous letter to the higher ups. All right, Adam, a pleasure.
Thanks, buddy.
All right, time for 3 keys to the match. Forge, Cavalry. Look, I've been stressing it only because it is very important. Key number 1 for Forge: emotions in check. Forge has played. We know they've played in many big matches over the years, and this roster specifically they've seen the Azteca. They took FC Montreal and Toronto FC to penalties. and they've won 3 CPL titles. Big game experience is not an issue with this club. Having said that, they are facing their biggest rivals with an opportunity to win their first championship in their home stadium. Pressure is still very high, and the club that navigates the mental weight of the moment will have a significant edge. The emotions are inevitable, but it'll be up to Forge to ensure theirs are in check and they don't lose sight of their ultimate goal. Key number 2 for Forge, super subs. No club can match the depth and versatility of Forge FC's lineup. No one comes close. With the elevated heart rates, stamina starts draining significantly quicker in matches like this, and that gives Forge an edge because they have the depth, they have the bench. This match, there's a good chance it won't come down to the starting 11. It will be decided by someone off the bench. And don't forget, this match will end on penalties if 90 minutes isn't enough. That adds a whole new dimension to those substitution decisions. This match could come down to which club does a better job managing their lineup in game. Key number 3 for Forge, Boogeyman Bex. I know we're approaching Halloween, but nothing is scarier, more terrifying for Calvary supporters than number 10 in orange, Kyle Becker, the Forge captain, one of the greatest player this league's ever seen. And he's been a Cavalry killer over the years. The heart and soul of the franchise. Becker, he has the ability to control a match in so many different ways. And he'll be a major focal point on Saturday at Tim Hortons Field. Forge FC/tickets. You do not want to miss whether it's Boogeyman Bex, although he's not Boogeyman to us fans, but he's he's just, he's going to play a significant role, but you can be there live to watch Bex in action, the whole club in action, and potentially see Forge FC for the first time ever hoist that championship. It's, by the way, can we just address the fact that I must have missed something, and I probably saw it and just forgot. I had North Star Shield written everywhere, and I've been saying it. And then I'm looking today and I'm like, oh, it's a cup now. It's the North Star Cup. I saw a photo on the CPL social media with poutine in the cup. So I'm like, okay, it's not a shield, it's a cup now. I missed that. Apologies for calling it a shield this whole time and not properly calling it what it is. It's a cup. And you can be there live to see it, forgefc.ca/tickets. The time for talking is done. There is a match to be played. I will be there, and I want to see you there. We'll talk to you soon.
Forge FC is prepared, and now you are informed. This has been Match Day Preview with Anthony Urciuoli on the Forge Audio Network. Subscribe on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.